That's Rhaenyra Targaryen watching Vermithor. She is the realm's delight, watching dozens of people burn alive in the dark because somewhere in all that fire there might possibly be a dragon rider who can win her a war. Most people saw this moment in Season 2 and decided they finally understood her. This was ambition with the mask finally off. It was the Targaryen blood doing what Targaryen blood always does. The madness arriving, right on schedule, the way it's said to come for all Targaryens sooner or later. Either way, the verdict was the same. Rhaenyra had become a tyrant, but they're all reading it wrong. House of the Dragon is doing something colder than that. There is a hidden driver behind every choice that puts Rhaenyra on that balcony. It is not ambition, and it is not madness. The show named it explicitly, on a cliff top, in a council chamber, in her own mouth when she's accused of it, and then it spent a whole season showing you the driver doing its work. Because this story doesn't start with the woman on that balcony. To truly understand how she got there, you have to go back more than a season, to a cliff top, and to the most gentle order she ever gave. Let me take you back to the start and walk you through it all. And once you see what led her to that horrific scene with Vermithor, you can't unsee it. It starts a full season before Vermithor's mass murder. The Rhaenyra of the Season 1 finale is the woman before, a queen whose first instinct, with a war landing on her doorstep, is restraint. She doesn't send her sons to fight, she sends them to talk, and she makes them swear they'll take no part in any fighting at all. This is Rhaenyra's baseline, and who she is before grief gets hold of her. The obvious interpretation of this scene with her sons is that she is a gentle queen, a naive one even, sending 2 boys on dragons into a kingdom that's already turning on her, armed with nothing but a message and a promise to behave. It may be naive, but it is also entirely in character as well. This is who Rhaenyra is in Season 1. Her governing instinct, at the moment war breaks, is to avoid the loss of life, including those of her enemies. She'd rather remind lords of the oaths they swore than burn them for breaking them. Another piece of her history that is often glossed over by fans is the ever-present pressure weighing on her, the pressure of the prophecy. Rhaenyra does not simply believe she has been named heir. She believes her rule is tied to something larger than herself, to the survival of the realm, and to a future catastrophe only her line has been entrusted to face. This changes her moral equation. If she is only a claimant to the throne, then sacrificing lives for her crown is ambition. But if she is the guardian of a destiny, then she has a sacred duty that cannot be ignored. And once grief enters that equation, the danger becomes obvious. Pain tells her she must act, and the prophecy tells her that acting is righteous. So let's get back to the woman on that cliff with Lucerys and Jaehaerys in the season finale. She is the control sample. Everything that happens next is what grief does to her, and Storm's End is what happens next. The errand she sent Lucerys on to prevent a war is the one that ends up triggering it. Luke and his little dragon torn apart by an uncle who only meant to frighten him. The first body and the deepest wound arrive at the end of the Season 1 finale. Here's the part almost no one talks about. In the entire Season 2 premiere, the show's central figure says barely a word. This is the series showing the grief of a mother and what happens when that grief cannot be metabolized. Rhaenyra is gone for most of the episode, and when we find her, she's flying the coastline searching for what's left of her son, because she cannot believe he's dead until she has seen it for herself. That's denial, the first stage of grief, and the show uses a second character to name it for us. Rhaenys, watching Daemon itching to retaliate, tells him plainly that Rhaenyra deserves to mourn, that finding the body is the only way she'll accept that the death is real. When Rhaenyra finally walks back into her war council, she has only one instruction. Not a strategy or a campaign, just a target. She wants Aemond. The episode title itself borrowed from a letter Daemon sends Rhaenyra in Fire and Blood. A son for a son, a promise of retribution. This is stage 2, arriving right on cue. The sorrow has found its channel. It has stopped being a bottomless thing she sits in and becomes a single name she can move toward. Grief converted into a target. And then, one episode later, the show does something extraordinary. It puts the thesis of this video into dialogue. When Sir Alfred Broom suggests that her grief might have driven her to bloody retribution, she rounds on him, asking, "My grief drove me to order the decapitation of a child." She is appalled. Having lost her own son, the idea that she would inflict that on an innocent is monstrous to her. Rhaenyra is shocked by the idea that grief would drive her to atrocity. From this starting point, see how far she has to fall to end up where she does. From a woman who recoils at the suggestion to a woman who stands on a balcony and accepts death as the cost of business. Here's the contrast the show is careful to draw. She doesn't author the indiscriminate act of vengeance to come. Daemon does. He is the one who hires blood and cheese. He is the one whose order goes sideways into a nursery and ends with a child dead in a cradle. Rhaenyra's grief at this stage still has boundaries. It's aimed at the one man who killed her son. Daemon has no such boundaries, and that is why Daemon is so important to this part of the story. He allows Rhaenyra to believe in her own restraint. He is the obvious danger in the room, the obvious creature of impulse, the man who turns grief into murder almost instantly. As long as Daemon is worse, Rhaenyra can still feel clean by comparison. That is one of the traps the season is setting. Moral collapse moves inch by inch until the thing you once condemned in someone else becomes the thing you now call necessary. The series is showing you the distinction, and it's telling you that Rhaenyra, for now, is still the restrained one. That's what makes everything after this have the impact it does. To understand what breaks next, watch who Rhaenyra loses at Rook's Rest. By episode 4, she has accepted that the war is coming, whether she wants it or not. A dragon has to answer the Greens at Rook's Rest, and Rhaenyra means to fly herself, but Rhaenys insists on going in her place, because Meleys is more formidable than Rhaenyra's mount, Syrax. Rhaenys and Meleys fly into an ambush and are killed, and Rhaenys was not just an ally. Rhaenys was the one who named the grief in episode 1 and the strongest voice of restraint in Rhaenyra's orbit, the one person at that table forever arguing against using the dragons, against escalation, against exactly the kind of mass death the war was sliding toward. She was Rhaenyra's handbrake, and now she is dead, and the handbrake is released. The single counselor who understood that grief needs time to heal falls out of the sky, and Rhaenyra is left with Daemon's violent instincts, her own narrowing grief, and no one left to urge patience. This is the moment people miss. Rook's Rest isn't just a battle Rhaenyra loses, it's the scene where she loses the only person who could have stopped what she does 3 episodes later, and into that empty space comes Mysaria, not as a replacement for Rhaenys exactly, but as a very different kind of influence. Rhaenys had urged caution. Mysaria teaches Rhaenyra how to turn pressure into leverage. She understands the forgotten, the used, the people underneath the great houses, and she gives Rhaenyra something she badly needs, a way to feel that her suffering is connected to something larger. That can be healing, but it can also be dangerous, because once the small folk enter Rhaenyra's story as a political force, they also become something else. They become bodies that can be gathered, moved, risked, and spent. And now we are back where we started, the underground lair, the fire. She has thrown the doors open to the lowborn, the bastards, anyone with even a drop of dragon blood, and called them to come and try to claim a beast that will almost certainly kill them. She knows what it will cost, and watches it cost exactly that, and she allows it, because at the end of all the death fire, there might be 2 new riders, and 2 new riders might win the war. This is why this scene is so much darker than a battle. These are not Hightower soldiers, and they are not the men who killed Luke. They are not guilty of anything except being hungry, hopeful, frightened people who have been offered one impossible chance to become more than the world told them they were. Rhaenyra's grief has moved so far from its original object that it now consumes people who had nothing to do with her loss. The showrunner has a phrase for what she's doing here. Ryan Condal calls it a ritual sacrifice. Now look at this scene alongside the earlier scene on the clifftop in the season 1 finale. Rhaenyra makes her sons swear to take no part in any fighting because she could not bear to endanger them. That was the baseline. This is what grief about her boy has turned her into. The woman who would not risk her own children now stands above a pit and watches dozens of people burn, sons, daughters, husbands, wives, brothers and sisters, and calls it the price of winning. And that is the bitterest irony of all. Rhaenyra knows what it is to lose a child. That knowledge should make every other parent's child more real to her, not less. But grief does not always expand compassion. Sometimes it shrinks it and makes one loss so enormous that every other life becomes smaller beside it. She is still a mother in this scene, but her maternal instincts have narrowed to such an extent that she can only fully recognize her own blood. She didn't become ambitious. She didn't go mad. She became lost in her grief, and then she lost the one person who was determined to help her find her way back. Go back through the whole season with this in mind, and the ruthless queen dissolves. The silence in episode 1 wasn't the show sidelining her. The demand for Aemond wasn't bloodlust. The hardening across the season wasn't her growing ambition arriving. It was the circle of people around her shrinking, loss by loss. The show was never showing us a woman reaching for power. It was showing us a woman carrying more pain than she could process, and a war that kept handing her more of it. So the next time you watch Rhaenyra Targaryen turn cold, you're not going to see a tyrant being born. You're going to see a mother being handed a coffin, choosing violence over mourning one more time, because it's the only thing that lets her keep standing. Which loss do you think was the one that truly broke her? Was it Luke, or was it Rhaenys? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more of this, the meaning hiding inside scenes you've seen many times before, subscribe. There are more of these running through every single episode, and we'll be untangling all of them.